long before the One Ring whispered its deceit into the hearts of kings, before the fires of Mount Doom blazed anew. Another war burned in the north, silent and cold, yet no less deadly. Before the great horns of Gondor echoed across the Anduin, before Sauron's eye turned southward to the White City, the true beginning of the end lay hidden in the snowbound silence of the north. Here, in the forgotten highlands beyond the Weather Hills, the ancient kingdom of Arnor, the northern sibling to Gondor, stood as a proud realm of men. But as is the fate of many great things, it began to wither, not from conquest, but from within. It was not war that first claimed Arnor, it was pride. After the fall of Númenor, Elendil the Tall, father of kings, founded two realms, Gondor in the south and Arnor in the north, the latter a beacon of wisdom and strength. Yet unity, once fractured, bleeds fast. Following the death of King Eärendil in the year 861 of the Third Age, Arnor fractured into three rival kingdoms, Arthedain, Cardolan, and Rhudaur. Each laid claim to lineage and land, but none could match the strength they once held together. The heart of Arnor splintered, and where there is division, shadow finds its home. As strife brewed between the petty kings of the north, a darker power stirred beyond the Etten moors, a realm born not of stone or law, but of sorcery and malice. A land where cold never yielded and fear held dominion over all. Angmar, its ruler, a name that would haunt Middle-earth across ages, the Witch-king, Sauron's most deadly servant. From the icy fortress of Cardolan, he plotted not conquest, but ruin, for he knew that in the north lay the soul of Elendil's legacy. And if that soul could be broken, the south would follow in time. He did not come with fire, he came with silence. He watched, he waited, and when the strength of Arnor had dwindled, and its people squabbled over stone and soil, he struck. But this is not just a tale of war, it is a tale of courage, of loss, and of the quiet strength that endures in shadow. And if you're drawn to the forgotten stories, the hidden battles that shape the fate of Middle-earth, you're in the right place. Subscribe to Realms Unravelled now, and journey with us through every chapter of this untold war, brought to life through vivid animation, detailed battle maps, and lore crafted with care. In the days to come, we shall delve deeper into kingdoms crumbling from within, into Palantiri and towers lost to time, into elves, rangers, and hobbits who stood when all others had fallen. But remember this, dear traveler, the downfall of a realm never begins with swords drawn. It begins in silence. Stay with us for Chapter 2, The Fracture of Arnor. When the might of kingdoms fades, it is not with thunder, but with whispers, and the north whispered long before it screamed. Once the banners of Elendil the Tall flew high across both north and south. Gondor, rich and thriving beneath the sun. Arnor, steadfast beneath the stars. Together, they were meant to guard Middle-earth, two brothers standing watch on either side of the world's beating heart. But while Gondor bloomed in the warm lands of the south, Arnor endured harsher winds. Time, as it always does, tested even the mightiest bloodline. The descendants of Isildur, proud and noble, grew fewer with each generation. The wars of old, the plague of pride, and the weight of their ancestors' legacy strained their hearts. And so it came to pass that in the year 861 of the Third Age, the unthinkable occurred. The High King Eärendil, last ruler of a united Arnor, passed into the halls of his forefathers, and with him, unity was buried. His sons, unable to agree on succession, divided the realm into three rival kingdoms, Arthedain in the northwest, ruled by Amlath, the eldest and rightful heir. Cardolan to the south, where ambitious nobles carved power from fertile hills. Rhudaur in the east, rugged and restless, ever looking beyond its borders. Each claimed the legacy of Númenor, and yet none possessed the full strength of the whole. Division, once born, is not easily slain. It festers, it deepens, and in time, it invites ruin. The three realms began to eye one another, not as brothers, but as rivals. The Weather Hills, once a shared defense against the wilds, became lands of bitter dispute. And at the heart of these hills stood a crown of stone, Amon or Weathertop, a sacred watchtower built by Elendil himself, housing one of the ancient Palantiri. Whoever held Weathertop did not just hold stone. They held sight. They held the power to pierce distance, to spy beyond mountains, and to see the movement of friend and foe alike. In a time where trust faded like smoke on the breeze, that knowledge became a prize none would yield. The hearts of men, once united in the name of the West, now drifted into suspicion and greed. And in the frozen silence, beyond the Etten moors, something watched and waited. If you're immersed in this tale of fractured realms and the fall of great houses, consider subscribing to Realms Unravelled. Each chapter reveals deeper layers of Tolkien's world, brought to life through immersive storytelling, battle maps, and stunning illustrations. Around the year 1300 of the Third Age, travelers began to speak of strange things in the north. Roads once safe were now silent. Villages lay abandoned, their fires long cold. A stillness spread across the land, not born of peace, but of absence. No banners marched, no horns blew, yet the land itself grew darker. It began as whispers of a figure unseen, cloaked in black mist, whose eyes gleamed like dying stars. A presence not of this world, gathering to himself orcs, evil men, and creatures long hidden beneath the roots of the earth. From the high, cold passes to the ravines of the north, a realm of shadow was born, Angmar, and its lord was none other than the first of the Nazgûl, a wraith king, twisted by the will of Sauron. Though his name was forgotten by men, his new title would be carved into fear for all time, the Witch-king of Angmar. He did not come to conquer, he came to corrupt, to unravel kingdoms not with sword, but with discord, with whispers, with fear. And the divided lands of Arnor were fertile ground. From Cardolan, the black heart of Angmar nestled in the northern mountains, the Witch-king watched the three kingdoms quarrel. He stirred rebellion in Rhudaur, where the blood of the Dúnedain had thinned. The proud line of Isildur had dwindled there, and soon the throne was seized by a hillman chieftain, a puppet whose will no longer belonged to him, but to the Witch-king. And so, Rhudaur fell, not to war, but to infiltration. It became a vassal of darkness, though its neighbors did not yet understand the full depth of that betrayal. Arthedain alone retained the pure blood of Elendil. Cardolan, weary and defensive, clung to what strength it could muster. But with Rhudaur lost and Angmar rising, the tides had turned, and neither Arthedain nor Cardolan were prepared for what was to come. The kingdom that was once whole now stood as fragments, each isolated and vulnerable. And from the snow-covered heights of Angmar, a storm began to gather. In Chapter 3, The Watch on Weathertop, the war begins in earnest. The Dúnedain make their stand, the elves answer the call, and the first blood is spilled in the War of the North. There are moments in history when stone and sword are not enough, when a single tower holds the memory of kings and the hope of what remains. Across the windswept hills of the north, where the mists cling to ancient stones and the stars shine with a colder light, there once stood a tower that reached for the heavens, Amon, the greatest watchtower of Arnor. It had no need for walls. Its strength was not in garrison, but in vision. Built by Elendil himself, Amon housed one of the Palantiri, the seeing stones gifted by the elves of Valinor. From this high place, the kings of Arnor could look beyond forests and mountains, beyond the borders of their fractured realm, to see, to prepare, to defend. And in a land torn by division, the tower was not just a vantage point. It was a symbol. Whoever held Weathertop held the right to lead. Whoever held it held the future. By 1356, of the Third Age, the war that had long whispered finally raised its voice. The Witch-king, through his puppet in Rhudaur, launched a brutal campaign alongside the growing legions of Angmar. Orcs swarmed from the frozen north. Hillmen came howling from the mountains, and fell creatures not seen since the elder days began to creep once more beneath moonlight. Cardolan, isolated and weary, could not withstand the tide alone, so it turned once more to Arthedain, its ancient kin, for aid. And Arthedain's king, Argaleb I, answered. Not as ruler of a divided realm, he declared, but as heir to Elendil, I will stand where the shadow falls deepest. He ordered fortifications built in the Weather Hills, not to expand his territory, but to defend what little light remained. Along the secret paths through dell and hollow, between standing stones and forgotten ruins, the Dúnedain and the warriors of Cardolan stood shoulder to shoulder, their cloaks blending into stone and snow. Their scouts spoke of a growing darkness approaching from the east, but they did not yet know that the Witch-king himself would come. And he did. The battle that followed would mark the first great blow in the War of the North. In the chill of early winter, the dark host of Angmar swept down from the highlands, their war cries like thunder upon the wind. Orcs charged, hillmen screamed, trolls shattered stone with every step. King Argaleb, shining like a shard of starlight amidst the dusk, stood with his men, unyielding. But the darkness was too strong. Though his blade sang and his heart was true, Argaleb was slain upon the field, and the tower was surrounded. Weathertop would fall, but not yet, for the Dúnedain, even in grief, did not falter. Arvaleg the Fmern, son of Argaleb, rallied the survivors, his father's blood still warm upon the ground. Word was sent to Lindon, where Círdan the shipwright, ancient and wise, heard the call. He dispatched a host of elves, swift and bright as starlight, who marched east with fire in their eyes. Together, elves and men struck back. They retook the Weather Hills, driving the forces of Angmar into the wild. And though the victory was incomplete, Amon was saved, for now. If this battle stirs your blood, and you feel the echo of horns from ancient towers, consider supporting our journey. Subscribe to Realms Unravelled to follow each stand, each fall, and each forgotten hero of the North. But the Witch-king does not forget. In the dark of Tia 1409, a full host of Angmar rose once more, greater than before, and now armed with cunning. He no longer sought just victory, he sought erasure. They came again across the river Horwell, cloaked in storms and fury. Arvaleg stood his ground at Weathertop, now king of Arthedain and defender of the north. With him were the remnants of Cardolan and elven allies from Lindon and Rivendell. They knew what was at stake, not a fortress, not a stone, but the last great symbol of unity. As the enemy encircled them and fires lit the horizon, the tower trembled. But before Amon could fall into enemy hands, a daring act was made. Under cover of night and wind, the Palantir, the seeing stone of Elendil, was smuggled away, carried north to Fornost, capital of Arthedain, where hope still lingered. And so, when Amon fell, it was with fire and fury, but not with blindness. The Witch-king, robbed of his prize, ordered the destruction of the ancient tower. Its stones were sundered, its walls torn down, its legacy scattered to the wind. But legends say the tower once reached the clouds, that Elendil himself watched from its peak for the sails of Gil-galad. And though now only a crumbling crown of ruin remains atop Weathertop, the memory endures. It was burned and broken, and nothing remains of it now but a tumbled ring like a rough crown on the old hill's head. Yet once it was tall and fair. The Lord of the Rings. In Chapter 4. The Siege of Rivendell. The Witch-king turns his gaze eastward, and the hidden valley of Elrond faces fire. When the shadow rises and the towers fall, where does wisdom go to hide? In the valley of the stars, where the rivers sing and time moves slower than sorrow. With Amon reduced to rubble and Cardolan bleeding from every hill, the Witch-king of Angmar did not rest. Victory was not enough. He desired silence, the kind that follows fire, the kind that buries memory. And so his gaze turned east, beyond the weather hills, beyond the ruined watchtower, to a place of ancient peace that had long eluded his reach, Imladris, the hidden valley, Rivendell. There, beneath snow-tipped cliffs and waterfalls veiled in starlight, dwelt Elrond half-elven, bearer of Vilya, the most powerful of the 3 elven rings, a healer, a scholar, a warrior of the last alliance. Elrond had seen ages rise and fall. His halls were a sanctuary for the weary, a beacon for the wise, and a shelter for the remnants of ancient bloodlines. But now, the war had come to his doorstep. Let it be known, the Witch-king whispered to the darkness, that no light shall remain in the north, not even in the Valley of Song. In the year 1409 of the Third Age, while Arthedain reeled from the loss of Amon and Cardolan struggled to defend its southern marches, the armies of Angmar descended from the mountains like a blight. Orcs and hillmen, clad in black steel and cruel laughter, marched under banners dark as storm clouds. They crossed the passes above the Bruinen, where the waters ran swift and deep, and at their back came the cold, an unnatural winter, summoned by sorcery and sealed by hatred. Rivendell, for the first time in an age, stood on the edge of annihilation. Elrond did not panic. He fortified the valley's entrances. He sent riders west to Círdan in Lindon, and north to the scattered ranges of Arthedain. And then he waited, not with fear, but with resolve. Rivendell will not fall while I yet draw breath, he is said to have told his captains. What followed was not a storm, but a siege. The enemy did not charge in reckless fury. They built camps in the surrounding highlands. They cut the valley off from trade and messages. And worst of all, they summoned creatures from the forgotten shadows, wights, wargs, and darker things that had not spoken since the First Age. It was a war of attrition, of patience, of withering hope. Inside the valley, the elves sang by starlight, their voices low but unwavering. Outside, the drums of Angmar beat like a heartbeat from hell. For 13 months, Rivendell held its breath. But hope, like roots beneath stone, endures in secret. From the west, Círdan the shipwright, eternal guardian of the Grey Havens, answered the call. Though his ships could not sail to Rivendell's rescue, his warriors could march. Elves of Lindon, fair and fierce, travelled across mountain and meadow, hidden by cloud and moon. And from the golden woods of Lorien, it is said that even a few Galadhrim crossed the misty mountains to lend their bows. The siege was broken, not in one grand assault, but in a slow unraveling. Skirmishes at night, arrows from unseen trees, whispers of vengeance sung on the wind, and when Elrond himself rode out beneath banners of silver and blue, Vilya shining like the morning star, the enemy faltered. They fled, not from might, but from memory. For they remembered the war of the last alliance. They remembered the wrath of elves. They remembered that some places were not built to fall. Are you beginning to see the deeper war behind the battles, the symbols behind the swords? Join us on this journey through forgotten glory and quiet resilience. Subscribe to Realms Unravelled to keep following the light through shadow. But the Witch-king, thwarted yet again, did not scream. He smiled, because while Rivendell stood, his armies had not retreated empty-handed. While the elves bled for their haven, he had struck south with a second host. Their target, not a fortress, not a king, but a crown of knowledge, standing alone in the wind. Weathertop once more. In that same year, 1409, Amon was attacked again, not for its palantir, it had already been taken, but to erase what it once stood for. King Arvelec I, son of the fallen Argaleb, died on its heights, his shield shattered, his sword broken. But in his final moments, a rider slipped through the ranks of darkness, carrying the Seeing Stone north, to Fornost, the last stronghold of Arthedain. Weathertop was lost, but the future remained unseen. The tower was cast down, the land around it scorched, and from the ruins, only smoke rose to meet the stars. In Chapter 5, the Barrow-wights awaken. The Witch-king invokes sorcery darker than steel, and the sacred burial grounds of the Dúnedain are turned into a cursed land of the dead. Not all wars are won with armies. Some are won with curses, with silence, and with fear. After the smouldering of Weathertop and the siege of Rivendell, the north seemed to breathe again, but it was a shallow breath. The Dúnedain, though bruised and bloodied, still stood. Their stronghold of Fornost held fast, and the palantir, once housed in Amon had been saved. Yet while blades were sharpened and banners raised in preparation for further war, the Witch-king turned his eye to a different weapon, not one of steel, but of spirit. There were lands the Dúnedain revered above all else. Lands not of fortresses, but of memory, not of warriors, but of rest. They were called the Barrow Downs, a stretch of green hills west of the Weather Hills, veiled in fog and silence. There, beneath ancient mounds, lay buried the noble dead of Cardolan and Arthedain. Kings and captains, warriors and wise men, all laid to rest in stone chambers, sealed by time and reverence. The people of the north did not merely respect the Barrow Downs, they feared them with a holy fear, and that the Witch-king would turn into a weapon. If I cannot break the living by war, I shall shatter them with the dead. In the year 1636, a new evil crept into Middle-earth, not by sword, but by sickness. The Great Plague, born in the east, swept through lands from Rhun to Gondor and then to the north. Cardolan, already wounded by war, was devastated. Villages withered, fields lay fallow. Children cried for mothers who would never wake. And as the hearts of men grew cold with grief, the Witch-king struck. With no armies to resist him, he sent shadow spirits, wraiths born of forgotten sorceries, summoned from the cracks between life and death. They descended on the Barrow Downs and claimed the mounds of the dead. These spirits did not merely haunt, they possessed. They entered the tombs, coiling like smoke into bone and dust, raising ancient corpses with eyes that gleamed a sickly pale. Thus were born the Barrow Wights. They were neither living nor dead, bound to the earth by the Witch-king's curse, with voices that whispered like wind through a grave, with hands colder than the night, with rings still clinging to bone fingers, echoes of honor long devoured by darkness. Travellers soon spoke of unnatural fog rolling down from the hills, of strange music in the wind, of lights flickering where no fire burned. Some went in, none came out. The Downs had become a graveyard of fear, not because of death, but because death no longer slept. If you feel the chill of this tale, if your heart stirs at forgotten sorcery and the fall of sacred places, journey deeper with us. Subscribe to Realms Unravelled, where Middle-earth's lost stories are brought to light with reverence and awe. Kingdoms can fall to blades, but Cardolan, what remained of it, fell to despair. No one dared reclaim the land, even when the plague had passed. The Dúnedain of the south, once proud and noble, faded into silence, their houses empty, their bloodlines broken. Only the Barrow Wights remained, watchful, waiting, cursed to linger until the world grew old and forgotten. Yet this was not the end of Cardolan's legacy, for even in shadow, a single light can endure. A few scattered Dúnedain, exiles and wanderers, took to the woods. Others fled to Fornost or joined the rangers of the north, vowing silently to preserve what little remained. But the Witch-king was not finished. If Cardolan could fall without a sword raised, could he do the same to Arthedain? His gaze turned once more to Fornost, and he began to gather everything for one final blow. In Chapter 6, the last king of Arnor, a young ruler rises as the north makes its final stand against the tide of Angmar. But when Gondor delays its answer, the kingdom of Elendil may be lost forever. In every age, there comes a silence before the fall, a breath held by fate, as if the world itself waits to see if one soul will stand when none remain. The winds over the north grew sharp again. The hills that once sang with the laughter of the Dúnedain were quiet now. Smoke no longer rose from hearths. Fields lay empty. The bones of kings rested beneath stones overrun by shadow. All that remained of Arnor, the once proud realm of Elendil, now stood behind the walls of a single city, Fornost Irain, the Northern Watch, the last crown of the North, and upon its battered throne sat a king too young for the grief he carried, Arthedain. Born to the line of Isildur, Arthedain was raised on stories of valor, of Númenor, of Elendil's sacrifice. He knew the names of every fallen king and every lost fortress. He bore their memory like armor and like chains. When his father, Arafant, passed into shadow, Arthedain took the throne, not of a kingdom, but of a graveyard. The Witch-king's armies had not struck yet, but the signs were clear. Orcs multiplied in the hills, hillmen prowled the eastern marches, and the Barrow Downs now breathed death into the wind. The end was not coming. It had already begun. In a final act of diplomacy and hope, Arthedain sought to unite the north and south once more. His claim was not without merit. He was of Elendil's line. His wife, Firiel, was daughter of Ondoher, king of Gondor. And when Ondoher and his sons fell in battle, Arthedain saw his moment. By blood and by marriage, I am heir to both kingdoms. But Gondor refused him. The stewards, led by Pelendur, dismissed his claim. They crowned another, Eärnil, victor of the Haradrim Wars, of the line of Anarion. He was strong, he was present, and to the lords of Gondor, that was enough. Arthedain's request was denied. No fleet came north, no aid would arrive. They will not come, he is said to have told his captains. We are alone. And so he stood alone. In 1974 of the Third Age, as winter clenched the land in frost, the Witch-king struck. His army surged forth from Angmar like a black tide. Orcs, wolves, trolls, and men twisted by dark will. Through the frozen woods they marched, over snow-choked paths, their breath rising like smoke from a furnace. They did not lay siege. They overwhelmed. Fornost, long the last light of Arnor, was overrun. Arthedain, with the last of his guard, fled into the wild, driven not by cowardice, but by the belief that hope might yet be rekindled elsewhere. He sought refuge in the ancient dwarf mines of the north, hidden in the Forodwaith, a land of endless winter. There, beneath stone and ice, the last king of Arnor waited. But food was scarce. Cold gnawed at flesh and spirit alike. The Lossoth, the snowmen of Forochel, found him wandering. They were hardy, suspicious folk, descended from those who had survived Morgoth's long shadow. They took him in, offered shelter, though they feared the wrath of the Witch-king. To them, Arthedain gave a token of thanks, the Ring of Barahir, ancient heirloom of the House of Beor, once worn by Beren himself. This ring is not of gold, but of story, he said. May it one day buy your safety, as you have granted me mine. But even here, the shadow reached him. Círdan, upon learning of Arthedain's plight, dispatched a ship north to rescue him. The sea was cruel, ice clawed at the hull. The waves howled like wolves. Still, they reached the bay. Still, Arthedain boarded. The Lossoth, ancient and wise in their own way, pleaded with him to wait. The cold hand of your enemy lies long across these waters, they warned. Wait for the summer tide. But Arthedain would not delay. The ship sailed, and just beyond the shore, the storm came. A blizzard, unnatural and furious. Waves rose like mountains. The ship groaned, cracked, shattered. And so, in the cold jaws of the sea, the last king of the north was lost. His crown sank beneath the waves. His sword was swallowed by frost, and his people scattered to the winds. These are not merely tales of defeat. They are tales of courage, of quiet heroism, of those who stood even when abandoned. Subscribe to Realms Unravelled for more lore-rich episodes where Middle-earth's most powerful forgotten legacies are brought to life. The Witch-king entered Fornost not as a conqueror, but as a corrupter. He defiled its halls. He twisted its stones with shadow. He sat on the throne of Arnor, not to rule, but to ensure no king would ever sit there again. But he had forgotten one thing. Oaths linger, blood endures, and hope does not drown so easily. In Chapter 7, The Return of the South, Gondor remembers its promise, and an army sets sail to challenge the darkness in the north. But it is not just men who march. Elves, rangers, and even hobbits will stand against Angmar's final hour. Some promises sleep for years, buried beneath war and time. But when the right voice calls, even the deadliest oaths stir. The north had fallen. Fornost was no more. Its towers choked in smoke, its streets overrun by beasts and shadows. Arthedain, the last king of Arnor, was lost to the sea, and the Witch-king of Angmar, victorious, seated on the throne of the north, believed his triumph complete. But from the southern seas, black sails stirred. For Gondor had not forgotten. Though Arthedain's plea had once gone unanswered, his death sent ripples deep into the soul of the south. King Eärnil, aged and weary, mourned the loss of a kin and a realm. And his son, Eärnur, Prince of Gondor, captain of its armies, heard the cry of the north, not as an echo, but as a call. The crown of Elendil does not belong to one land, he said. Where his sons bleed, Gondor shall answer. And so, in Tia 1975, Gondor prepared a host the likes of which had not marched in centuries. Warships, sleek and swift, were launched from Pelargir. Knights of Calenardon, Anorian, and Lebanon rode north. Blades gleamed, banners unfurled, horns sang into the wind. Aenur would lead them, not just to war, but to redemption. They sailed up the coast, past the mouths of Anduin, beyond Belfalis, through waters long silent. And when they reached Lindon, the elves beheld them with awe. For Círdan the shipwright, whose heart still ached for the lost glory of the north, saw in them more than men. He saw an oath reborn. And so he called upon elves of Lindon and the hidden bowmen of Rivendell. He sent riders into the hills of Eriador, where scattered rangers and exiled Dúnedain still walked. Even from the green land of the Shire, a few brave hobbit archers, small of stature but vast in courage, answered the call, remembering that their peaceful land had once belonged to the kings of the north. A new alliance was forged, not of convenience, but of conviction. They crossed the river Lune, not into celebration, but into war. The Witch-king, ever cunning, had not waited within Fornost's walls. He gathered his hosts and moved to meet the southern army in the wild hills between the North Downs and the lakes of Nenúil. He believed he would crush them in the field, as he had crushed the Dúnedain. He did not expect what stood before him, a force of elves and men, united, prepared, burning with fury. Aenur led the Gondorian cavalry around the flanks. Círdan stood with his elven spears at the center, and behind them all, the Dúnedain raised their father's swords once more. And when the Witch-king's horde descended, shrieking and snarling, they did not break. They charged. The battle that followed was called the Battle of Fornost, though it was fought far beyond its ruined walls. The host of Angmar, black and twisted, surged with fury. Trolls pounded the ground, orcs screamed, but the Gondorian knights struck from the rear, catching the enemy in confusion. The elves loosed their arrows with deadly grace, and the Dúnedain, long thought broken, fought like the ghosts of Númenor reborn. The darkness wavered. Then Aenur met the Witch-king on the field. He spurred his great horse and charged toward the shadowed figure, whose presence turned the very air to ice. The Witch-king, cloaked in black, raised his blade and let loose a shriek so terrible that it stopped the hearts of men. But Aenur did not falter. He drew his sword, his courage like fire, and was about to strike when his horse reared. Terrified by the Nazgul's presence, it threw its rider and bolted into the mist. Aenur fell. The Witch-king laughed, a sound not of mirth, but of ruin. "No man may slay me," he whispered, before turning to vanish into the gloom. But he did not vanish fast enough. From the east, riding upon a white horse like a beam of starlight, came a figure older than the Witch-king himself, Glorfindel of Rivendell. He did not speak. He did not need to. The Witch-king paused. For the first time, he hesitated, and then he fled. He spurred his mount north, away from Fornost, away from the rising sun, disappearing into the cold shadows of the mountains. "Do not pursue him," Glorfindel said to the returning Aenur. "Far off yet is his doom, and not by the hand of man shall he fall." So was spoken a prophecy that would echo through the ages. This is the climax of the Angmar War, but not yet its end. If you're captivated by the threads of prophecy, the rise and fall of kingdoms, and the echo of forgotten oaths, be sure to follow Realms Unravelled. The final chapter awaits. The army of Angmar was broken. Its beasts fled. Its shadow receded. Arnor was free, but gone. There was no king to reclaim the throne, no army to patrol the roads, only memory and a people who would now walk unseen. In Chapter 8, The Line of Kings, Hope flickers in exile as the chieftains of the Dúnedain rise to protect a land that no longer remembers them. And a hidden flame waits to be kindled by the hand of destiny. Not all thrones are carved in stone. Some are carried in silence, in exile, through shadow, waiting for the world to remember. The war was over. The Witch-king had fled. Angmar was broken. But so too was Arnor. There were no trumpets when the last sword was sheathed, no rebuilding of towers, no triumphant king returned to claim his throne. The Northern Kingdom lay in ruin, its cities shattered, its people scattered, its royalty vanished. But it was not ended. For though Arthedain was lost, he had left behind a son, a boy who would grow not in courts, but in quiet places where memory still lingered. His name was Aronath. He would not take the title of king. He would not sit upon a throne. Instead, he became something older than kingship, something quieter and far more enduring. The chieftain of the Dúnedain. Under his leadership, the remnants of Arnor, noble bloodlines, scattered warriors, and watchful souls gathered once more in secret. They became the rangers of the north, wanderers, guardians, shadows in the trees. They bore no banners. Their names were forgotten, their victories unrecorded. But they watched. They watched the roads near the Shire. They patrolled the ruins of Cardolan. They stood guard at the edges of Rivendell, where the last stories of Númenor still lived. Within Rivendell, under the care of Elrond, the sons of each chieftain were raised. They learned of Elendil, of the downfall of the two great kingdoms that once stood. They trained with sword and bow, but also with wisdom and patience. Elrond himself, half-elven and full of memory, guided them. For his brother Elros, the first king of Númenor, had chosen mortality, and in the blood of these sons, the legacy of both elf and man endured. There, in the hidden valley, the heirlooms of the house of Elendil were kept, the ring of Barahir, returned by the Lossoth, the shards of Narsil, broken at the foot of Sauron, the scepter of Anúminas, symbol of kingship, long unclaimed. They waited. Years passed, then centuries, then nearly 1,000 years. The world moved on. The south waxed and waned. The east grew darker once more. The Shire grew peaceful, green, and round. Its people forgot the rangers who walked its borders. The name of Arnor became little more than a whisper among scholars. But in the north, the line held. 27 generations of chieftains, fathers and sons, walking a road of silence and sacrifice, never ruling, always protecting, until finally, the world turned once more. From the hills of Eriador came a man with grey eyes and a burden in his voice. He was the 16th chieftain of the Dúnedain, a descendant of Elendil, of Isildur, of Arthedain, a ranger, a warrior, a healer, a king in exile. His name was Aragorn, son of Arathorn. But the world would come to know him as Elisar, and when the war came once more, when the ring was found, when the shadow of Mordor rose in fire, he did not run, he did not hide. He claimed what was always his. At last, the scepter of Anúminas rose again. The shards of Narsil were reforged into Andúril, flame of the west. The white tree bloomed once more, and the king returned. Gondor and Arnor were reunited, and the line of Elendil endured. If this tale moved you, we invite you to journey further with us. Subscribe to Realms Unravelled for more deep lore, forgotten battles, and the stories between the stories of Tolkien's legendarium. For the crown may be worn by few, but its memory is carried by all who choose to stand against the dark. The North may have fallen, but it never truly died, not while the blood of kings still walks under the stars.